The severance letter smelled like printer toner and finality. Lena had read it 3 times, standing in the hallway outside the accounting department, and it still said the same thing. Redundant position, effective immediately. Please return your access card to HR. 11 years of keeping Hargrove and Associates from accidentally committing tax fraud, and they sent it by interdepartmental mail, not even a proper envelope. A folded sheet, her name written in Sharpie on the outside, like a lunch bag. She pressed her back against the wall and breathed through her nose. The thing people don't tell you about being let go is that the worst part isn't the shock. The shock is actually fine. The shock is clean and white and carries you forward on autopilot. You fold the letter, you go back to your desk, you put your coffee mug and your desk succulent into your computer bag. You smile at Diane in accounts receivable, because Diane doesn't know yet, and you're not going to be the one to make her afternoon terrible. The shock handles all of that. It's the moment after, when the shock wears off in the elevator, that the real thing hits you. Lena stood in the lobby of her building on King Street West and thought, I have $42 in my checking account. My rent is due in 8 days, and my mother is going to say, I told you so, in exactly that tone of voice that makes the words feel like a hand on the back of your head, pushing down. She walked out into the November air and turned left, which was not the direction of the subway, but she was not ready to sit still in an underground tube and feel people glance at the cardboard box she was carrying. She walked until her feet found a bar she'd never been to, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookshop on a street that felt like it existed only in the grey hour between 4 and 5. It was called Vane & Co., which sounded more like a law firm than a place that served drinks. The sign above the door was hand-painted. The light inside was amber. She went in. The bartender didn't look up. There were maybe 6 other people in the place, spread out the way people do when they want to not be noticed. Lena put her box on the floor under a bar stool, climbed up, and ordered a rye and ginger because it was the most Canadian thing she could think of to order in a moment of personal crisis. The man 2 stools down was reading something. Not his phone, an actual document, printed, bound at the corner with a binder clip. He had good hands. She noticed that before she noticed anything else. The kind of hands that looked like they'd actually done things, not just signed things. There was a scar running along the left one, from the base of the thumb toward the wrist. Old scar. Long-healed. He didn't look up either. Lena drank her rye and ginger and tried to do the math in her head. The math being severance pay she probably wasn't going to get, the employment insurance timeline in Ontario which was an absolute disaster, the amount her sister Dara owed her, which Dara would describe as a loan and Lena would describe as money I will never see again, and the rent, always the rent, which was not $42. The math wasn't working. You're carrying a desk succulent, said the man 2 stools down. He still hadn't looked up from his document. It's mine, Lena said. I didn't suggest otherwise. People assume, she said. When you're carrying a box out of an office building, people assume you're stealing. I don't know why. What would I do with someone else's succulent? Sell it, he said. He turned a page. If you needed money. She looked at him sideways. He had dark hair going silver at the temples, a jaw that looked like it had opinions. He was wearing a jacket that cost more than her monthly rent, which she could identify because she had spent 11 years auditing expense reports, and she knew what good fabric looked like from 4 feet away. Do you work near here? She said, because she was terrible at silence and always had been. No, just passing through. No, do you just not like people? Or is it me specifically? He looked up. His eyes were grey. Not poetically grey, just the flat, functional grey of a filing cabinet, which sounds unflattering but was actually quite striking. He looked at her the way a person looks at a column of numbers they're not sure adds up. I don't know you, he said. So it's not you specifically. That's almost a compliment. It wasn't meant to be. His name, she learned over the next hour, which happened gradually, the way conversations do when neither person plans to have one, was Croft. Just Croft. He offered it the way people offer a business card, efficiently, without warmth, as information and nothing more. She told him her name was Lena Marsh. She told him she'd been an accounting manager for 11 years and had just been made redundant, which was a word she had started to hate with a specific and focused hatred. She told him her rent was due in 8 days and she had $42 and a succulent. "And a rye and ginger," she said, "which is now $38, the bartender said, appearing from nowhere. "So," said Croft, closing his document, "you're a bookkeeper, accounting manager, difference, scope, authority. How much of someone's financial disaster you're legally responsible for?" Something shifted in his face. Not a smile, exactly. More like a door opening a centimeter, letting out a thread of light. "I have a scope problem," he said. "Everyone has a scope problem," she said. "That's why they hire accountants." "I have a particular scope problem," he said. "My last financial controller walked off the job 3 weeks ago, without notice, without filing the Q3 reconciliations." Lena felt the specific cold of someone who has done bookkeeping for a long time hearing the words, "without filing the Q3 reconciliations." "That's terrible," she said. "It's inconvenient," he said, with the tone of someone for whom inconvenient covered a significant range of situations. "I have a review in 12 days. "What kind of review?" "Internal." He looked at her steadily. "I need someone who can work fast, work quietly, and not ask questions about the nature of the business." "What is the nature of the business?" "That," he said, "is a question." She looked at her glass. She looked at her box. She thought about Dara, who had called last week to say that the apartment they'd grown up in had finally been sold, which meant the last physical evidence of their childhood home no longer belonged to their family, and who had then pivoted immediately to asking Lena for $800 for a flight to a bachelorette weekend in Vegas, which Lena had not been invited to, which Lena had said no to, which had ended in a silence more articulate than most conversations. "Contract work," she said. 2 weeks. Full rate. Daily rate. Not hourly. He named a figure. Lena kept her face completely still, which was a skill she had developed over 11 years of sitting across from partners who were trying to convince her that certain expenses were legitimate. The figure was not $42. The figure was not remotely in the territory of $42. "I'd need to see the books first," she said. "Obviously," said Croft. "And if I find something that concerns me, legally speaking, then you document your concerns," he said. "And you are free to act on them as you see fit after the engagement ends." She thought about this. It was technically a correct answer. It was also the answer of a man who had thought carefully about what a correct answer looked like. "Okay," she said. He nodded, as if she'd confirmed something he'd already known. He pulled out a business card and slid it down the bar to her. It said Croft and a phone number. No address, no title, no company name. "Monday morning," he said. 8 o'clock. He left before she could respond. He left a $100 bill under his glass, which was more than the bill warranted, and walked out without looking back. Lena sat at the bar for another 20 minutes, holding his card. The cardstock was heavy, heavier than it needed to be, which told her something. She wasn't sure what exactly, but something. She called a friend that night, a woman named Prue she'd gone to Ryerson with, who now worked in financial compliance downtown. She described the situation without naming names. She described the card. She described the jacket and the scar and the document with the binder clip. Prue was quiet for a moment. "Croft," Prue said. "As in, like, just Croft? No first name?" He didn't offer one. Another silence. Longer this time. "Lena," Prue said in the voice she used when she was choosing words carefully. "There's a Croft who runs about half the private credit operations in this city, not the legal half." Lena's kitchen was very quiet. "The private credit part or the not legal part," she said. "Both parts," said Prue. Lena looked at the card. "The Q3 reconciliations aren't going to file themselves," she said finally. "Lena, my rent is due in 8 days, Prue. Your rent is not worth. Do you know how long it takes to get EI approved? Because I do. I have an extremely specific number." Prue sighed the sigh of someone who knew she wasn't going to win this conversation. The address arrived by text at 6:40 Monday morning. It was a building in the financial district. Not flashy, not the kind of building that announced itself. The kind of building that had been there for 40 years, and planned to be there for 40 more. and was not particularly interested in your opinion about it. The lobby had marble floors and a security desk and a man in a suit who was expecting her. She was taken to the 4th floor. The offices were clean and quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't empty, the kind that was enforced. 2 men at desks, not talking. A woman in a glass-walled room who looked up when Lena walked past and then immediately looked back down. A hallway that ended in a solid-looking door. Croft was behind the solid-looking door. The room had a window that faced west. She could see the lake on a clear day, she thought, and this was a clear day. He was at a desk that was not decorative. The surface was covered in binders and printed sheets and a coffee cup that looked like it had been there since sometime last week. "The reconciliations," he said, instead of hello, and gestured to a table along the wall where a second set of binders was waiting. Lena put down her bag, sat down, and opened the first binder. For 4 hours, neither of them said anything that wasn't about numbers. This was, she discovered, not unpleasant. He worked across the room from her and didn't hover and didn't explain. When she had a question, he answered it directly, without the performance of patience that men in positions of authority usually used, which was always somehow more condescending than just being impatient. He was not performing patience. He was simply present. By noon, she had a picture of his operation that was simultaneously more and less alarming than she'd expected. The money was real. The revenue streams were documented, if you were willing to read the documentation in a particular way, with a particular willingness to not ask where certain consulting fees originated. The Q3 gap was bad but fixable. His former controller had panicked and walked out. She could see it in the numbers, the point where the documentation became sloppy, where someone had stopped caring about the cover and just left the wires showing. "Your last person didn't leave because of personal reasons," she said at noon. Without looking up, he said nothing. "She left because she got scared," Lena said. "There's a set of entries in mid-September where she stopped reconciling properly. She was just moving numbers around and hoping no one would look too closely. She finally looked up. That's what panic bookkeeping looks like." He was watching her with that grey filing cabinet gaze. "You've seen it before," he said. 3 times. Once at a pharmaceutical distribution company in Mississauga, once at a very reputable architecture firm in Yorkville, and once at a family restaurant on the Danforth that turned out to be having a significantly more complicated year than their tax filings suggested. Something crossed his face. Not amusement, something quieter than that, more considered. Interest. "Can you fix it?" he said. "Yes," she said. "It'll take 10 days, not 12. The framework is solid, the execution is just." She waved a hand at the binders, emotionally compromised. "Then fix it," he said. She fixed it. Not all at once, and not without frustration. The frustration was mostly aimed at his former controller, who had had genuinely good instincts and had then applied them in a spiral of increasing desperation, like watching someone who knows how to swim panic themselves into drowning. Lena spent the first 3 days essentially unpanicking someone else's books, which was tedious and oddly intimate. She spent the evenings in her apartment with takeout and a spreadsheet, which was not glamorous. She was aware that she was doing accounting for a man who almost certainly, ran operations that existed in the significant grey space between legal and not. She was aware that the $100 bill he'd left at the bar was probably, in the grand hierarchy of his expenditures, approximately co-equivalent to the lint in a coat pocket. She was aware of all of this, and she kept working, because the books were interesting, and the work was real, and at some point in her 31 years, she had stopped being the kind of person who waited for the safest option and started being the kind of person who chose the option that was in front of her. Croft, she learned, drank his coffee the way he existed in general, without ceremony, without variation, without apparent enjoyment. It was fuel. She found this clarifying. On the 4th day, she arrived to find 3 men in the hallway who had not been there the day before. They were wearing the kind of stillness that is not natural, the kind that is trained. She walked past them without changing her pace, went to the table, opened her binder. "Situation?" Croft said from behind her. "No," he said after a moment. "It's not." The 3 men left by noon. She didn't ask. On the 6th day, she found an error. Not a small error. The kind of error that means someone, somewhere at some point, had been moving money laterally in a way that was not reflected in the consolidated statements. And if the review caught it, it wouldn't just be inconvenient. She sat with it for an hour. Then she knocked on the door to his office. "I found something," she said. He looked at her. "Intentional?" she said. "No." The answer was immediate and had the weight of something he'd been waiting to say. "My sister's husband. Former. As of last week. Your brother-in-law was managing a subset of accounts," Croft said, with the precision of someone describing a disease rather than a person. "We are no longer in business together." Lena looked at the paper in her hand. "The review will see this. I know. I can build a corrective framework," she said slowly. "Document the discovery. Show it was caught internally prior to review. It won't make it disappear, but it changes the narrative." He was quiet for a long moment. "Why would you do that?" he said. "Because it's the accurate story," she said. "The money moved wrong. You found it. That's what happened." She met his gaze. "I document what happened. That's what I do." He looked at her for a long time. "You know what I am," he said. "I know what your books say you are," she said. "The books say you're a man with a disloyal former family member and a Q3 reconciliation problem. I can work with that." The corrective framework took 2 days. She was precise about it because precision was the thing that made it defensible, and defensible was the difference between an error and an investigation. She documented the lateral transfers, the dates, the pattern, the catch. She wrote the narrative in plain language the way she always did. No softening, no flourish, because clear language was cleaner than careful language, and clean was what the review would look at. She handed it to him on day 8. He read it at his desk while she packed up her things at the table. She didn't watch him read. She was not a person who watched people read her work. Either it was right or it wasn't. "You could have not found this," he said, without looking up. "I find things," she said. "It's the job. You could have found it and said nothing. I don't do that either." He set the document down. "You're going to be done on Friday?" "Yes, and after Friday?" She looked up. He was not asking about the contract. "After Friday," she said carefully, "I'm going to file for EI, update my resume, and spend an uncomfortable amount of time applying for roles that will pay me half of what I made before and expect twice the output, because that is the current state of the Canadian accounting market." He looked at the document. He looked at the lake, barely visible through the west window. He looked at his coffee cup. "I need a financial controller," he said. She said nothing. "Not contract," he said. "Ongoing. I know what you run," she said. "Yes, I know that the books, however good they are, only tell part of the story." "Yes, I would be responsible for the part of the story the books tell," she said. "Not the rest of it. That's what I'm offering." She thought about Dara, who had called twice since the layoff, and not once asked how Lena was managing. She thought about the apartment on King Street, with the radiator that knocked, which she had made into a home with 11 years of takeout containers and overdue library books, and a succession of desk succulents, and which would require, going forward, an income. She thought about the filing cabinet grey of his eyes, and the way he had said "I know" when she told him the review would see it. Not defensive, not calculating, just acknowledging a truth. "I have conditions," she said. He gestured, slightly, with one hand. "Go ahead. I document accurately. Always. If I find something, I tell you, and I document it. I don't hide things and I don't lose things. Agreed. I am not available for conversations about operations I am not part of. Agreed. If I decide to leave, I give 2 weeks' notice and you don't make that difficult." He paused, for exactly 1 second, which was the longest pause any of her conditions had produced. "Agreed," he said. She looked at her bag, at the succulent which had survived the week on the corner of the table under fluorescent light with the mild indifference of its species. "You don't even know if you can trust me yet," she said. "You found an error that would have damaged me and reported it instead of using it," he said. "That's more than most people I've known for 10 years have managed. That's a low bar," she said. "It's my bar," he said, "and you cleared it." She picked up her bag. "I'll need access to the full consolidated statements," she said, "going back 3 years, and a proper workstation, not that table. Done. And the coffee situation needs to improve. Whatever is happening with that machine in the hallway is not acceptable." He looked at her. "The coffee machine," he said, with the tone of a man who had survived things she could not imagine, confronted with a concern he had not anticipated. "I work better with better coffee," she said. "That's not a character flaw, it's an efficiency issue." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll have it replaced," he said. "Thank you." She buttoned her coat. "I'll see you Monday." She walked out down the hallway, past the glass-walled room, past the 2 men at their desks, past the marble lobby and out onto the street, where the November air had turned, and the first thin snow of the season was starting to fall on Bay Street, in the particular light way it does before it decides to mean it. She stood for a moment outside the building. She thought, this is either the most sensible thing she had ever done, or the least sensible, and she was not currently in a position to tell the difference. She thought about the books, their framework, which was solid, and their execution, which she had corrected, and how there was something almost satisfying about the work, the real work, underneath all the rest of it. The numbers didn't care who they belonged to. They either balanced or they didn't. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the subway. Her phone buzzed, a message from a number she didn't have saved, which was already telling her something. "The coffee machine will be replaced by Monday," it said. "The model is the same one used by the 3rd floor of the TD Tower. I am told it is acceptable." She stopped walking. She looked at the message for a long moment. She typed back, "It's acceptable. I'll see you Monday." She put her phone in her pocket and kept walking, and the snow fell thin and indifferent on Bay Street. And somewhere above the 4th floor of a building she was starting to know, the lake sat grey and clear and very still in the last November light.